how we make PPTs in IMC. This is called plagiarism, a form of piracy. We just download PPTs from slideshow and present it in the class. That is a form of piracy we live in. But I'm not going to talk about this piracy. I'm going to talk about piracy which doesn't take place in the land but takes place at the sea. So the formal definition of piracy, as we know, is unauthorized use or reproduction of another's work that we always do, and the other is practice of attacking and robbing ships at sea. So we will show the clip.
This is something you learn.
Rash, Turner. Rash. It's without doubt the worst pirate I've ever seen.
Exactly, this is the kind of piracy we are going to talk about today. So, this piracy is not defined by the laws of a state or country. This piracy is defined by the international laws, which is here like any illegal act of violence or detention or any act of degradation committed for private ends by the crew or passengers of a private ship or private aircraft or directed. As we go through the another point, the definition of piracy according to international laws only concerns the piracy that takes place on the international waters on which the state doesn't have any control. So that is the idea of this definition. The large amount of piracy takes place in the Southeast Asian waters, in the waters that are controlled by the respective countries, but they can't do anything about it. And this piracy just goes on and without taking any action. We will see how the piracy evolved. So before 1970s, the piracy was opportunistic piracy where the local pirates used to attack the tugs or barges. But after 1970s, the piracy took very sophisticated where the big business tycoons of Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, China and US, they started forming syndicates, started hiring the local pirates, and those syndicates used to attack the commercial vessels for cargo or other illegal stuff. So the major form of piracy, this form of piracy was insurance fraud, documentary fraud and cargo diversion. Insurance fraud was mainly cargo fraud and hull fraud. As the name suggests, cargo fraud is for the cargo that is in the vessel. The cargoes can be olive oil or drugs or arms, anything that is important and valuable. The hull fraud wasn't for the cargo that is in the vessel, but for the vessel, which was renamed like many times and used for illegal reasons like human smuggling or drug smuggling. And after what happened in the 1979 and the early 80s, around 40 insurance frauds were detected, and the insurance companies formed a Far East Regional Investigation Team, FERET, which actually created a report which found out that all these frauds, all these insurance frauds, like they didn't know that these are frauds previously. That's how they ended up losing $100 million. But now they know that these are frauds, and then they formed a committee and they approached governments and pressurized them. The insurance fraud was declined because few people were prosecuted. But after that, it started the documentary fraud where they used to forge the documents and then they used to contact the seller, and when the seller finds out that it is a fraud, there is no vessel of this name, then at that time the buyer actually totally disappeared or he will declare liquidation. And then cargo diversion, where the cargo would never get delivered to that destination which it is meant to. I will take two examples of how this took place. So There was a vessel called Anasira. It was registered in Cyprus as the name Anasira, but then it left southeast Bangkok for Manila, and then it was attacked in the Thailand by pirates, and then it was proceeded to Chinese coast, and now it was named Arctic Sea. And then Chinese authorities actually detained the ship, and later they found out that this is not the Arctic Sea, this is Anasira, but they refused to give it back to the owner. They instead demanded money of around $4 lakh from the owner, which obviously couldn't give. Then the ship was detained in the Chinese land. Cargo was auctioned, and after some days even the ship was auctioned. Here we see that total exploitation of the owners and the crew members and everybody. Like, they didn't even get the cargo, didn't even get the ship. Another example is of Petro Ranger, which left Singapore, and it has the cargo worth $1.5 million. It was again caught by pirates in Malaysia and directed towards China, named Wilby. And then Chinese people sold the oil which was in the ship in the black market. Here the cargo, the ship was given back to the owner, but the cargo wasn't. So in both of the cases, somebody is getting exploited and there's somebody who is exploiting. Prateek will explain what is actually taking place.
Yeah, so here we will have to call upon Mr. Karl Marx and see what he has to say about the structure that we see here in this issue. So he said that whenever profit is made, it is made at the expense of one person or an entity, and the person or the entity is being exploited. So we want to see who is being exploited here. So firstly, the crew members of these ships are being exploited. How? The pirates, they come, they rob and they take away all they have. The crew members are put in small rooms and kept for weeks or days. And also, these crew members at times are also exploited by the government officials. How? Because once this ship is captured by the government, it's kept by the government for weeks and the crew isn't allowed to go back to their home country. The owners of the ship, owners in this sense are both the exploiters and the exploited in this case. The exploiters in a way because the insurance frauds which they conducted by trying to show that the ship which they had has been sunk or it has been robbed, etc. So they used to claim the insurance, which is how they were the exploiters, and exploited because the owners of the ship were being exploited by the government. So once the government catches the ship, they extort the owner and say that you have to pay some. So as we saw in the example, yeah. So after 6 months, the ship was stalled and it wasn't, and the owner could not pay the money for the ship, and at the end of the day, the ship was auctioned off. So yeah, and thirdly, the insurance companies. Now, how would the insurance companies be exploited? The companies were actually seeing these frauds happening from the owner's side, and so the exploitation was being carried out by them. So we move forward and we'll see what was the class and the class struggle there. is why they have to go into these kind of occupations to keep or to feed their own kind. The crew members, how are they the operators and how are they trying to do the class struggle here? The crew members weren't being paid attention to by either of the parties here. The owner was of the view that once the crew is on the ship and the crew is on its own, and if the ship goes into the sea, he'll get the insurance, but the crew members won't get anything at the end of the day. The global trading club, now how are they trying to make a class struggle here? So the trading club felt that across the world piracy is on a high and we should do something to protect our own interests. For which they formed bureaus like IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, IMD, ERC, etc. to keep their own interests at bay. The oppressors were of course the cartels and the government here in this case. We'll go ahead. So we speak about the form and the content. So the formation of these organizations was to keep piracy at a bay, but the actual content was far from it. So what we see was only the trade-related ships were actually considered, or the crimes which were conducted on these kind of ships were being considered as crimes. The governments of a few countries weren't as aggressive to report these crimes due to the few issues they had. So the first issue was the fear of bad mouthing. So the governments will feel that once trade countries see them as so once the governments feel that other trade countries see them as insecure seas, so they won't allow their ships to cross by those seas and have trade. The problems with the crew. So the crew wouldn't be interested in these kind of occupations if they feel like the seas or if they are scared of the seas, because if they go on the seas, the ship might get attacked or they might get killed or hijacked in this case. The insurance premiums kept increasing because the insurance companies would feel that these seas or these oceans which come under our state aren't as good to insure because ships in this case keep going on and off frequently. So alienation. So what we see here is piracy was seen as only crime where you try to get cargo or the hull. But it expanded into much more. So it expanded into human smuggling, drug smuggling, etc. The IMB, so the objective of the IMB was to curb piracy, but actually the only thing it was interested in to know that every small crime which was happening on a ship or a boat was seen as an act of crime. So piracy here turned into an objective reality of sorts. Because the concern was only for the crime and not where the crime is happening. So at times you will see that 800 crimes are being are in action in a small part of the sea. But out of those 800, only a few would be actually on the state's ocean, and everything else would be in the international waters. And the mode, means, and the scale of the crime was actually unimportant to IMB. The root cause of the economic and political policies in the government of this region was actually not there, so it was unaccounted for. The ideology. So piracy we see here as a free market. Why a free market? Because the pirates felt that in an occupation like piracy, where the state's law of the land isn't applicable on the seas. So if you do a crime on the sea, you can actually get away with it freely, and the government at times helped them with that. The pirates used to work for cheap, and there were hordes of them to work for. So the free market here again. The government didn't used to intervene much because firstly it was an illegal thing to do. So the government wouldn't know where it was going on and what was going on in there. And because the government intervention was at the least, the market very real in this case. The consumers were the pirates and the consumers were the pirates and they used to consume whatever assignment was offered to them. So we are trying to draw an interesting parallel here with cricket in India, which would be explained now.
So we wanted to have something interesting with piracy, because cricket is one thing which is very close to all Indians. So we tried to draw a parallel between ICC, that is International Chambers of Commerce, and BCCI, the governing cricketing body in India. So we say that since BCCI and cricket, most of the stuff you people know, so trying to draw a relation or trying some sort of mapping between the two pieces. We see that International Chambers of Commerce was more like a governing body. We are trying to make sure that all the trades which is happening between the countries were going in the right manner. So IMB, International Maritime Bureau, that was started by ICC, whose main purpose was to report all the piracies happening in the southeast region and trying to inform the countries that we should do something about the piracy happening in the nearby regions. The bureaucrats, not just the bureaucrats in IMD, but even the bureaucrats in Chinese government or the bureaucrats in different countries are synonymous to players who are the players in the cricket. And pirates, I'll map it to non-players who are the basically match fixers. IMO, there was another body like IMB, which was International Maritime Organization. That was the first organization actually started to curb the piracy problem, but it could not succeed because, as Prateek said, there were certain conditions that made it difficult for the countries to report, like insurance and bad name, bad marking, and all those reasons were applicable on IMO that made it unsuccessful. So that would be somehow related to ICL, International Cricket League. As most of you know, as I said, cricketing is something very good. So ICL was started by Subhash Chandra, and it was sort of rebellious, trying to bring different players, mostly retired players, and trying to show that BCCI is not the only governing body, we can also have a balanced cricket then. So, profit making part, if you talk BCCI, was money making machine. It's the richest cricketing body in the whole of the world. 70% of revenue from cricket is generated by BCCI. So, these are like, this is the revenue chart, as I said. IPL is the biggest contributor. 40% of revenue comes from 40% of revenue from IPL goes to BCCI, and they have money coming from skating rights and sponsors, international games, which were initially the biggest money-making techniques for them, and at whose expense? This is something. It is quite obvious, like other games in the country. Yeah, we have so many games happening in India, like India is the world champion, but very few people know. So other games, other sports are suffering because of BCCI. Player fatigue, IPL is such a hectic schedule that 2 months it takes a toll out of the player, and then immediately we have some sort of tools like this England European happening. So we would expect the players to be fatigued. So BCCI is exploiting players in every sense. Other cricketing boards, yeah, because state boards are mostly controlled by BCCI. In the sense, BCCI has such huge cash reserve that they can control anything. Even the government officials are manipulated. So state cricketing boards are nothing. If you draw a parallel between the class and class struggles of the pirates with the cricketing body, you will find doctors are domestic players, the state boards, as I said, they are honest. Other sports, as I explained before, media and press. Yeah, this is interesting. We say that media generally exploits and brings out the truth in front of, and they can manipulate the whole thing. But very few people know that BCCI actually controls the major portion of what do you call it? The media release and just releases happens. That is most of the time controlled by BCCI. If any question comes up which BCCI thinks that it is not appropriate for this question to be reached out, so they can cut down that question and nobody in the world would know that any controversial question was asked to MS Dhoni. Now somehow the footage gets leaked, but most of the time BCCI controls the press and the media. And who is up to say? BCCI. So if you look at the form and content, form is formation of IPL. To show the world that we are promoting domestic cricket, we are promoting cricket in the whole globe. We are preparing a bunch of domestic players which can be upgraded to play for international levels. But it hardly happens. Mainly it's concerned about printing money. If you look at the content part, making money out of IPL, glamorizing sports. Domestic players demotivated to improve skills. Yeah. So we know this that the real technique of cricket comes from test cricket because that is the real test of nerves. If you can play for 5 days, you are one of the best players. If you can sustain the ball coming out of the off stump and you can play, you can understand all those deliveries. These are the real techniques of cricket. But unfortunately, IPL does not teach that. IPL will teach you skills to make quick runs, but that does not create a better player out of you. So how many players from IPL have been moved to test cricket? It's very rare and it will never happen, most of the time. Then players stay too close to glamour, drugs, sex. Recently there was a case in some foreign players and one of the Indian players were caught in having drugs and glamour and all parties. So these are like the effects of IPL. So as I said, IPL is a whole package. It's not just about cricket now. There has to be music, there has to be entertainment, there has to be cheerleaders. So IPL is comes out as a package to the audience. So the real thing in cricket is somehow lost in this whole discussion. So BCCI would do every possible mode of making money. Like they would control everything. Piracy cricket as objective reality if you want to see. Then cricket as a means of making money, you can find it out. Players were neglected, considered expended at the cost. Honestly, if IPL is such a money-making mechanism, all players would like to join IPL, and so the real players aren't coming out. Add-on frills, as I said, glamour, parties and all, being as intrinsic to cricket, which was never initially. Ideology, I would say it's a free market because we are drawing a comparison between piracy. No strict punishment for match fixing. Banning a cricket player whole life wouldn't serve the purpose of curbing this match fixing. Mohammad Azharuddin, best example. He is now an MP from Hyderabad. I think recently he lost, but previously he was elected as an MP. So nothing much happens to these players. We need stricter punishments. Same with the case with piracy. The pirates are released into Indonesia and they are deported to different countries. No strict rules are there as such to curb this. Courts of care and BCCI expense. Yeah. As I said, so many players are desperate to play for different teams that they are ready to do anything to get into the IPL matches. IPL, you all know. So, hypothesis, politics and economics of a state are fathers of policy.